Those who have pursued the unseen were seen as cursed. Sometimes they were. More often, they were victims of a cruel church, a ruthless ruling class, and ignorant minds. We, however, live in a different age. Do not fear, seeker of the unseen. Today is a new dawn. The dawn of the dragon Djinn.
Hello, my name is Aristomenes, and welcome once again to Dragon Djinn Alchemy. In the previous video, we talked about the analogy of the sacred flame. This analogy pertains to the dynamic of a synthesis of three factors that come together in Dragon Djinn Alchemy. And these three factors pertain to a mystical process of integration. In magic, they're usually used or considered to be separate forms of being. You have a flame that emits light. So light is one aspect of the flame. The second aspect is the heat. The heat and the power of the flame to burn. The third aspect is the source of the flame, the fuel. This can be a candle or a lamp or something. Now, the source of the flame usually requires a container. Where you have a candle, this container is the base of the candle. However, as the candle burns and it burns out, the structure is depleted and until it disappears. However, if you have a lamp, the structure remains until the lamp is empty of fuel. Now, this is interesting because you can replenish the fuel. Even with a candle, you can create a new candle. So you understand the life and death analogies here. You also understand that of the analogies of being able to cultivate yourself, so you establish a kind of source of fuel. Let's call this fuel life force, for lack of a better word. So we have two components here. We have an energy component and a matter component. We have a component, shall we say, esoterically of spirit and of matter, of yang, of yin. The matter is the container. It has containment properties, but it also has fueling properties. The matter is important because the flame cannot exist without fuel, and the fuel usually dissipates unless it is contained, at least in manifestation. In other realms, we don't know, and it really doesn't matter for us. What matters is not us going to other realms, which you might call projection, or even death if it's permanent, or at least more permanent than a single, if you lose the physical frame, in other words. But what we care about is bringing those realms to us. What we care about is making them one with us, not just the realms, but their denizens where it is appropriate. Now, Dragon Djinn Alchemy is all about that. It's all about reaching and bringing and integrating. And from this integration, there is a learning. On the other hand, if there is, for example, an entity, a spirit, a something, a force, we do not take it and force it into us to make it part of us permanently. What we do is we model our own energy body, our own being, because the human frame isn't just material. There is an energy frame. We are conscious beings. We're not just rocks, So we can model our energy and we can replenish our energy and we can cultivate and grow. So anything the spirit is and does, we can also do with its help, of course. At the same time, the Congress with the spirit benefits as well. And I say spirit very loosely. Now, I don't want to get religious here. We're not talking about devils and demons and things like that at this point, even though Congress with these beings that I would call Djinn, there's a lot of, it's been maligned. So you may hear a lot on the internet about the evil Djinn and devils, and from religious factions, from New Age factions, from alternative media factions, I'd be the last one to be against a good conspiracy theory. However, insofar as these entities go, it's very easy to generalize, especially if you are a non-occultist. Even if you are an occultist, there is confusion in the scholarship. And if there isn't confusion in the scholarship, then there's confusion between, let's say, the Middle Ages and today. There have been misrepresentations in modern times. So that being said, let me continue. The thing is, the Goetia portion of the Lesser Key of Solomon directly only addresses the Djinn portion of our equation. It gives us a list, and it gives us sigils, and it gives us a certain ceremonial. It also gives us mythic anecdotes. However, the name of the system, which deals with the 72 spirits, is an allusion to the 72 divine names, which have been transformed into 72 names of angels with a certain addition of a Hebrew suffix or endings. Now, essentially, the idea of an angel being summoned along with a spirit, with a Djinn, is, we can find it in the work called the Testament of Solomon. That's about 3rd or 4th century AD, I guess, after the Common Era. We can find it there, and the idea was that the angel polices the spirit, the demon, or the Djinn. Technically speaking, however, that's a religious term. You have to assume that the Djinn, or the so-called underworld spirit, is bad, it's evil, it's dangerous. It might be dangerous because it might be wild, like a wild animal is dangerous. But however, it is sentient. It is sentient, meaning that there's consciousness involved here. It's not just a raw force. So an interaction is possible. And it has a nature, and the nature is one that is aligned with human nature. It is not necessarily in conflict, whatever the historic things, scenarios were, whatever the past was. Right now, there is a way to align with these spirits. The reason I am including the angelic portion, shall we say, is not to police the Djinn portion. It is to accelerate the system, because the angelic dynamic as consciousness, as higher consciousness, acts as a guide where the Djinn portion cannot. The Djinn portion is a force. It has its own wisdom and understanding and knowledge. However, the bigger picture can be seen through the eyes of the angelic portion. The angelic portion isn't just a mental flashlight that tells you, okay, this is where it goes, this is what it does, and this is what you're supposed to do. It's more a dynamic of sensate awareness. It augments with your sensate awareness. It, shall we say, vibrates your nervous system, your being, to be able to handle the Djinn energy better, to lubricate the wheels, so to speak, and to specify the purpose of the Djinn in accordance to what benefits the individual the most, as an alchemical process and as a tutelary as a process of teaching, of learning, and of cultivation. Now, further down, I'll get to why cultivation is so important. But for now, I'd just like to say that even though there's a lot to discuss in these presentations, and I won't be running out of material anytime soon, going into detail regarding the occult convention or ceremonial is beyond the scope, of these things. Going into any detail of how the traditions were done, what the history is, maybe I'll refer to something, but mostly this is about the I don't like to use the word theory, but let's just say that it's the pragmatic underpinning, the descriptive, okay, let's just say the theoretical underpinning of a practical application of esoteric possibility. Now, the system has its own set of procedures. It utilizes the symbol arrays referenced in the Lesser Key of Solomon. And these symbol arrays are not to be discarded, in my honest opinion. I use them, they're very useful, and they have their own wisdom. So I will be doing some interpreting where these symbol arrays are concerned. We're talking about planets, legions, metals, sacred geometries of circle, triangle, square, cross, pentagram, and hexagram, all referenced in the Lesser Key of Solomon and denoted as being used for specific purposes. So I will discuss these at a deeper level, may or may not agree completely with tradition, but you may say, okay, you can actually connect the dots and say, okay, this isn't what tradition says exactly, or this isn't what tradition says at all in some cases, but it makes sense, you know. So if you keep an open mind, you might see that it makes sense, and dots are connected, and that's the important thing here, that dots be connected. Let me sidetrack a bit and refer to a split in modern popularized esoteric thought that is, I believe, relevant to understanding and successfully applying Dragon Djinn alchemy. The split refers to the rift between magic and mysticism. It appears that in the last several decades, the two occupy different camps. Now, both camps are respectable, they're worthy of study, and when left undiluted by the various influences of mass marketing, which I consider corrupting and nasty, and the bias of political correctness and religion, as well as what we may call amoral preconceptions, there isn't much to clarify. You know, what you need to do is basically remove these biases. And again, it's very hard. It's very simple in theory, but it's very hard in practice to stick your preconceptions at the door. Now, there's a camp here of occultists, and there's a camp of New Agers. And this rift, I have noticed, is represented by, you know, occultists bash the New Agers bash the occultists. You know, there are radical New Agers or people in alternative spirituality that consider any kind of applied occultist, especially spirit summoning, as evil. There are many in the New Age community that might consider the Djinn, whether some of them are even, you know, they're not New Agers, but they're Christians. So they talk a lot like New Agers, and some, even though they bash each other, the New Agers and the Christians. So you basically, it's fundamentalist Christians, not everyone. But Djinn are demonized, and they shouldn't be. They are not safe beings. They are not pastel angelic beings. They're not nice little cherubs. They're not polite most of the time. And you got to consider that most occultists who aren't even worthy of the name are using Christian methodology, which takes this entity and focuses hatred and rage at it and threat and, you know, essentially psychically tortures it. You know, there is no alignment and no alliance and no synthesis going on here. So how can the individual have a, you know, it's like raping and then demanding that your victim is polite to you and being pissed off and demonizing the victim because it doesn't submit. Now that's just sick, you know. And I'm not the only one who is into this kind of thing, is into this kind of occultism that is outraged at this attitude. I mean, it's actually, you know, finally, it's actually something more common than it was. In the past, I would be hearing things of, oh, you know, this demon gets me and I'm possessed and I had all these terrible things happen. And to tell you the truth, so did I in the beginning. And I believe it was because of this prevalent attitude. I believe, or I have observed, let's put it that way, that things have shifted. So these days you do not have, that's good. I mean, you don't have these dangerous beings anymore. But, and of course many would say, well, you could, but you should protect yourself and all of this. And I say, well, it's not a matter of protecting, it's a matter of preparing, okay, and being mature about it. And knowing what you're doing, and that's probably why, not probably, but it's why I'm making these videos, you know. I do want to help in that sense. Not just the people, but the Djinn themselves. And I believe there is a deeper purpose behind this, you know, whatever else may be going on. And it is not malignant. Now, if the Djinn themselves, from being difficult, unless you practice a certain ceremonial, of course, they're the most difficult when you do practice that ceremonial, but if the Djinn themselves are easier to relate to, even though they may not provide, what they used to provide according to some claims, even though I'm not so sure of that. But if they can change, we can change our attitudes. We can change the attitude that says this new age is blah, blah, blah. Alternative spirituality, or spirituality in general, the mystical experience, in other words, is a necessary part of a rounded out magical experience. I mean, you can practice magic without mysticism at all, but it becomes very, very materialistic. It becomes very, very mechanical. Most people like to just follow the rules, follow the thing, get the ritual implements, say the names, and you get a result. I would have to disagree with those people, and I don't want a debate or an argument about it. My thing is, look, I'm not going to ask you to spend the rest of your life doing this, but there's a certain procedure. It is not specific as it is in ceremonial. It is a procedure of cultivation and of understanding the symbolism. This procedure is a lot more flexible than what you might call rigid ceremonial. There's a lot of ceremonial that is not rigid, so there's a lot of debate about that as well. But what I want to say is that this is a matter of your own being, and being in general, existential. Esoteric dynamics are existential. It is not like the laws of physics. It is not clear cut so much. It is very, very subjective in the sense that it comes from within. It depends on you, who you are, and how you are. And it should, because you are the only thing under your control. So it's good news. You have a lot of options to when you realize that it's your responsibility to yourself to, shall we say, be your own authority. And I know religions don't like that, monotheistic ones and stuff like that. But this does not mean you're some arrogant trying to sit on some throne of God or some demon. It just means you are free and unconditioned to the greatest extent possible. Now, that's a good thing. Anyways, I don't want to defend either occultism as a mechanical application of rules and tools, or do what I will, button pushing. I do not want to defend New Age spirituality either in any touted shape or form, really. I want to get back to the basics, and I'm not a traditionalist or a purist, but I just want to get back to the felt basics of practice. I will explain myself every step I go, and maybe I will explain myself too much sometimes. But there is such a thing as Congress with the underworld. There is such a thing as the underworld. There is such a thing as the celestial world. But these may not be physically located beneath the ground and above in the sky. Or they may just be that. Or it may be both. We have to explore this. It's not a matter of anymore. Anybody can say anything these days. We are in the information age, which is the disinformation and misinformation age as well. So discernment is important. So I'm going to do my best to explain myself every step of the way, because I have this pet peeve I really, really want to clarify, man. And if I'm not clarifying, I don't feel good. I don't feel right, So I'm going to go out of my way, even though I'm a lazy person, by nature, to explain certain things, to make sure that there are no misunderstandings, even though I know there will be, because that's the nature of the beast and the nature of human beings. So, I just want to say that Congress with the underworld, Congress with the celestial world, Congress with the human world, all of these things, and especially the synthesis of these, goes hand in hand with divine realization, with self-realization, and it corresponds to a single esoteric tapestry that includes the application of all these things, including the so-called powers, psychic powers, the power to define the future, the power to understand the present, the power to comprehend and make sense of the past, the power to influence people, the power of charisma, the power to alter probabilities so prosperity comes your way, not necessarily humongous amounts of wealth. If you look at the Lesser Key of Solomon, there are very, very few jinn that relate to material wealth. You know, and if you look at the Vedas, you will see a lot of prayers and meditations. I'm going into Hinduism now, you know, just as a reference, that refers to wealth. This offers you great wealth, give us wealth. And people think, oh, that means that wealth means money or horses or goats or whatever they had in those days. No, wealth means accomplishment. It's the ability to go through life as a sovereign, to not want for anything because what you need is always there because you desire it, and that's a magnetic force, and anything that stands in your way is put aside. And I don't mean forcefully, and I don't mean you conquer all and all of that crap. This isn't about warrior mentalities here, although it may seem to be. Sometimes it may seem to be a battle. And there are probably going to be confrontations for the very reason that there are forces out there, even if you just want to call it inertia or the status quo or habit or something a little more politically correct than you know, real demons or, you know, real evil or whatever. You know, we can ignore that. But there is hostility out there. Maybe there's other people. And there's a magical field, and some of these other people may sense that what you're doing is, well, there's another player on the block, you know. Something's going on here, you know. We don't want that. We don't want people empowered. Look at all of the efforts that empires and churches and you know, tribal leaders and all of these things, they've gone to so much, even establishments like modern day science, you know, these things have been done for so long that off the bat, oh, it's stupid, it doesn't work, we don't believe in it, it's bullshit, you know. Instead of saying, wow, man, you know, you look at all of these things around you, like you're making up stuff like black holes, which nobody's ever seen, and yet you're out there looking for them, even though nobody's ever seen them, and you think that you see something that might be a black hole, you're running after it, you're making equations, you're forcing millions, and yet something like the ability to read another human mind because of some emanation, or to be able to look through time, or to be able to predict, you know, to view something. Yeah, they'll say, yeah, things like that, psychic abilities, they've looked into them and they found out they didn't work. Well, how about other life forms that are not biologically based? Things like that, the deeper levels. Don't tell me that, you know, these were never a concern by all of those that say it's evil, or it doesn't exist, or it's stupid, or you're crazy, you know. No. People in authority, not people in authority, but basically, let's call it the ones who believe they are in control do not want real magic known, because then you affect reality, you change the status quo, and they are not in control. The only reason that there are no more witch hunts is because we have been convinced it's all bullshit. And by we, I just mean the human majority. And those who have not been convinced it's bullshit are running around in circles based on, you know, basing their efforts on traditions that are essentially corrupt. Well, that was a side note. I'm sorry, I needed to get out of my chest, you know. It doesn't have much to do with our discourse per se. It's important to know at the onset that our stance and our attitude is should take priority as we approach this kind of situation. Approaching any occult system, any esoteric dynamic, cultivation, ritual, whatever, I believe and know that, you know, and have had experience in the fact that the stance matters. If you scorn the potentials of inner cultivation beyond those of the, you know, just, you know, increasing your intellectual powers, your powers of perception, you know, just conventional mental stuff, conventional mental will, as many modern magical systems seem to train, then I believe you hobble yourself. If you flinch in religious superstition or a misplaced sense of moral apprehension at the tools that would only be unsafe or unwise to handle due to a lack of the ability to respond properly, then your psychic balance and self-knowledge are hampered. You see, you enter something and it doesn't demand blind belief. Skepticism is a good thing. An open mind is a better thing. However, preconceived notions, again, will be your downfall. Especially in the system that requires you to have your eyes open, your ears open, the rest of your five senses open, and beyond the five senses, your intuition open, everything. There, everything taken into account in terms of your discernment, in terms of your potential to understand things based on your accumulating experience. So the stance needs to be one of not just having what people call an open mind. It means to be able to stand and disregard what you think you know, but not to the point that you go against yourself. If this is a matter of betraying your own principles, then obviously, I would never recommend for fundamentalist Christians, for example, or a fundamentalist of any ideology that distinctly has them convinced that this is a bad thing, to proceed with it, because that's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then again, I do not encourage people who are completely think religions are evil, or they haven't gotten over whatever traumas they have because of some kind of religious upbringing, in order to get even with their past by pursuing something they think spits in the face of it. This is not what this is about. This is for somebody who wants to better themselves in the sense of becoming healthier, more empowered, more free, more able to apply the decisions they seek to make and make them real. This is not for somebody to prove themselves in any way, except to prove that they can be healthier and more empowered and more free. This is about fulfillment, and it is also about a potential that some people at least may have a purpose. They may have a purpose that can become clearer with the possibilities that are offered through a cultivation such as Dragon Djinn Alchemy. Doorways can open that would not have even been perceived as being there in such a pursuit, because your discernment, your perception, your intuition, and certain abilities that are considered paranormal are heightened. There are many things that occur, and I will get into that again in the future. It's not easy to list these things down, because a lot of things presented in the system itself, not just the system, in the list of Djinn, you have things, this Djinn gives you this, the offices was to bestow this. Some of these are direct, such as knowledge of esoteric topics, knowledge of the future, the past, the present, things where knowledge is the key. They're pretty much straightforward. Other things are, basically being able to manipulate other people, mind control. It is, in some older grimoires, you can basically, it's considered to be the capacity to cause illusions or delusions or a dreamlike state or visions and things like that. But these things need to really be examined and understood, because in my honest opinion, you can have a lot of misunderstandings here. And a lot of false expectations, like people who think you should have a mountain of gold at your disposal, or else you know nothing and you're not worth their time of day. Usually somebody with a mountain of gold is not going to go out of their way to present information like this. People, you have to have a certain mindset, a certain set of ambitions that do not open you up to sharing something like this. So it's a matter of where your values lie. Nobody wants to starve to death and stuff. And usually with occultism, if you're really dedicated and are discerning and are open and basically balanced, you always get what you need. When you go out of balance, though, you can easily end up with nothing. So, and a lot of people become bitter because they have had more expectations. The thing is, people who end up so bitter, or are so negative, and resentful, well, something wasn't right in the first place. So if people like that, end up with material power, with popularity, with becoming celebrities or whatever, this might distort their personalities even more. So I don't know. The jury's still out, I think, on what occultism is supposed to bestow, especially the way it is practiced, because it all depends on what kind of occultism you're talking about. Now, in any case, the first step in any practice for me is for anybody to get their head straight around what you want to accomplish. Anyone who wants to wrap their heads around the information presented here is served to know what constitutes a constructive attitude or stance regarding it. So a constructive attitude is basically not one in terms of good or bad. It has nothing to do with ethics, even or the lack thereof. See, when I say, okay, it has nothing to do with ethics, all of a sudden these amoral people pop up and say, oh, well, you don't have ethics, so we can just go hurt you if we want, nobody cares. No, that's not it at all. I mean, doing something just because it's unethical, or doing something because it's not unethical, that's almost like, well, you're doing it based on its results in terms of, how meaningful it is for you, or meaningless. If it's meaningful for you to be nihilistic, I can't fucking, tell you to do it, because goes against my sense of meaning. But I can understand what would motivate you. Now, the thing is, if you're a nihilist and you want the world all to be gone and everybody else to be gone, to shove it down everybody's throats, then I can't just say, well, I can't support you, I'm just going to go do my thing. But, if you're a clear and present danger, I'm going to do everything in my power to stop such things. Now, that does not mean the way see, that's the value of occultism. A lot of assholes engage in occultism as a means to screw people without the law getting involved. You can go curse somebody, mess up their day, mess up their week or their lifetime if you're that into it, and have that much charged, as it were. And nobody can point a finger at you legally. And if they come after you, you can actually sue them or get the law on their asses if you're, wily enough. Or you can go screw with people's heads. You can go make them fall at your feet. It's not easy. Not everybody does it, but theoretically, such a thing is possible with occultism, and that's one of the reasons why people just declare it evil. There's a lot of bad shit that can be done with this stuff. There's a lot of good shit that can be done with this stuff. There are levels of healing that are possible. There are levels of understanding. There are levels of addressing issues beyond the corporeal that essentially, you may not be able to address in any other way. And if you find yourself confronted with a lifetime that seems meaningless, and your common reason just says, well, you got no choice, dude. You got to grin and bear it. There's nothing else to do. Otherwise, you go and grab a gun or get violent, oppose the system, or try to rally the troops or whatever. It's a pain in the ass. This isn't much easier, but at least you can do it by cultivating a sense of empowerment on your own steam, and you can move forward in a way that has options that mundane things do not. Okay? So I'm just speaking generally here. Don't even ask me about specifics. Things like that are learned along the way. Now, as I said in the previous video, leave your preconceptions, all ye who enter into this discourse. Please bring your discernment, however, whatever is left. And sometimes, you need some preconceptions to even operate discernment. It cannot be operated in a vacuum. So bring in what is meaningful for you. Be honest. If this thing clicks you the wrong way, just drop it. The point is that it doesn't work unless you are committed. You might even be committed to an experimental attitude and to a skeptical attitude. That's okay. That's commitment, though. You're giving your all to pursue something involved in it. If you're committed to debunk it, you're just going to debunk it. It's not going to prove itself to you. So maybe, if anything, this is a challenge for some people who think they're skeptical, who think they're open-minded, who think they're rational. But in the end, all they want to do is just prove something wrong, because that proves them right. So, think of it in those terms. This is a challenge to reflect, who are you? Are you honest with yourself? Or do you care? If you don't care, then it doesn't matter. But caring is the most important thing. That's one of the things that it's a mark in one's favor, as far as if caring is your stance. I care about this. I care about the results. I want results, but I'm not going to, I want results, and I will commit to it, and I will explore it, and I don't want to cut corners, but I'm not going to go around and down every path in danger of spending the rest of my life falling for dead ends and wild goose chases. See, that's something that appears to be one of the risks of going down pathways that are not accredited by a large number of people, by a tradition, by the status quo, by authorities. You say, well, am I wasting my time? So in presenting this, it is my sense that I want to show you that you are not going to waste your time. Even if this is not for you, you will not waste your time. There's always going to be something to get out of it, However, the more you commit, the more you get. Okay. So, on a final note, this. Now to recap everything. In this system, I will elaborate on magical methods mainly connected to the empowerment of symbols and the power of the word. Now, I also want to elaborate on topics of esoteric cultivation, including principles borrowed from Jewish Kabbalah, Indian Tantra, Tibetan Yoga, Oriental, Chinese Neikong, and whatever else I've been working on over the last 10 years. I've been exploring these things prior to that. I've been into occultism, as I said, for about 30, 35 years, since high school, and pretty seriously. And, but in the last 10 years, I've been kind of taking everything I know and working with things in order to compose my path, as it were. Just because I didn't agree with everything else. So I wanted to compose my path. And one of the major manifestations of MP, my path, is Dragon Djinn Alchemy. And it uses an existing resource, a very public resource, and it works. However, everything I've done is based on esoteric cultivation. You empower yourself, you train, you work through something, you develop yourself, and you develop the abilities. It's like athletic training, only it's not so mechanical. It is existentially meaningful. Now, as I said, the first step is what matters is your attitude or stance. Self-knowledge, being true to yourself, as cliche as it may sound, is going to save you a lot of time and heartache. In addition, we tend to bog down with conceptual clashes between ideologies. This is a New Age thing. Oh, this is an eclectic thing. Oh, this is a purist thing. This is occultism is evil. I don't want to bog down in these things. What I've been doing, and a lot of people are going to say, well, you use your personal pronoun a lot, dude. No, I also don't want to bog down in that kind of thing. Let me just say it as I know it, as I've experienced it, and if you want to pursue it, but I need to present it. In fact, there's a lot I want to present. There's so much that I don't know how it's going to be presented. I'm learning along the way. I've compiled a lot, but it's just the nitty-gritty of getting it out there. Thing is that a lot of people today say some things like knowledge is power, and I have to say I disagree. That knowledge itself is not power. Wisdom is power. There's a difference. A lot of people confuse knowledge with data acquisition. If you know a whole bunch of trivia or a whole bunch of things, even to the point of the establishment and its surveillance systems, If you, of course, there's power over somebody if you got the goods on them and you're going to threaten or blackmail them. But what empowers you must go through the gateway of understanding. If you're going to be empowered with knowledge, you need to understand. You need to own it. You need to make it your own. You need to make it an expression of yourself, not just something that you learned how to repeat like a parrot, or how to repeat mechanically, learning which buttons to press. You need to make it a part of you. It's like a musician, unless they make the instrument a part of them, then they're just a player of the instrument. They're not an actual musician. They're not an artist. Let's put it this way. This is why occultism, it's a skill. You can call it a science because of the knowledge involved, but you also need to call it an art, because it's an expression of yourself more than anything else, really. And even though we may say that there is one tried and true way of doing this, which we can't really say that. We can say it, but, it's not going to reflect the truth as far as I'm concerned. Or that we need to benefit from tried and true methods like it was done in the old days and things that work. We also need to, in my opinion, look at the fact that knowledge evolves, wisdom evolves, we evolve. We change, circumstances change, history changes, Yes, history repeats itself, but circumstances are never precisely exactly the same. They're different enough that we need to consider how we apply ourselves, at least esoterically speaking. So do we want to apply ourselves in the way they've been applying themselves 500 years ago? It may have worked for them. Are we sure it's going to work for us in the same way? Are we sure it's going to work for us to our satisfaction? How do we even know? The good news is that if you are true to yourself, if you have a stance that is healthy, basically that is meaningful for you, then at least you're moving to the best of your ability. So eventually you're going to resonate with something that works for you. And that's really what matters. Now, on the other hand, there is a question that we need to answer. Okay, you're going to present the system, or you're presenting it already, the basics of it. What is it going to do for me? Well, I can't answer that, but I can say, why would anybody want to go through something like this? What are the promises and possibilities? Even if there's a promise and a possibility, it is not definite. It depends on the level of commitment. It depends on predisposition. It depends on who a person is. What blocks are in their way? The thing is that you will see progress. If you commit, it's not going to take years either. Part of the redesigning of the system from tradition into something more modern, as far as I'm concerned at least, is to shorten the length of time, of cultivation time. Now, the actual Western system doesn't have much cultivation. All it has is, or all it seems to have is knowing the prayers, knowing the ceremony, knowing the, this, that, and the other, repeating it, getting the items, putting it all together in the right way, just going through the motions. Now, for me, it's the accumulation of power, the accumulation of life force, the accumulation of awareness, the opening of potential, and the application of it. Maturity and wisdom are important. However, in this system, just like in much of modern magic, good and evil do not traditionally come into play. Again, good and evil don't come into play, but that doesn't mean, anything goes. Because there is something that is healthy and unhealthy. There is something that is meaningful and meaningless. Of course, meaningful and meaningless is subjective, but healthy and unhealthy is not. If something disrupts my life and my ability to function, and my ability to function meaningfully, then even if my sense of meaning is different than yours, then the result is still objective. It's still my ability to function, So, and that is observable. Even if I try to fake it, ultimately, in the long run, it's observable, and it's observable to me, for the most part. In that sense, it's objective, but it might as well be, it's subjective, but it might as well be objective, even if you want to argue the point. So, this whole dynamic, is not 100% guaranteed in and of itself. It is, the guarantees are maximized if you put in the effort, if you put in the commitment, if you are drawn to it. Do not feel that you are drawn to it, however, because of some sense of promise. Occultism tends to be seductive. It tends to, stories tend to build around it. Legends, a lot of these legends are allegorical. They talk about internal actualization. However, abilities and powers are real, and perhaps in the past they were more easily cultivated. Perhaps our technological level has created an atrophy. Perhaps the electromagnetic pollution that's all over the planet is disrupting things. Maybe chemical toxicity, this, that, or the other, might create conditions, but none of this is definite. There's no proof. And one of the reasons there's no proof is because this isn't something established. It's not something institutionalized. Maybe it shouldn't be. But authorities were never good on other people learning magic, especially the common folk. So, and I don't think they will be. The good news is that magic is not credited. So there ain't going to be any witch hunts.